the Director of Communications and Government Reporting here at AECL, and I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. I'm joining you from the AECL offices, along with some of my colleagues here, in Ottawa, Ontario, and we are on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people who've lived on this land since time immemorial, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. Now, I know we have people joining us from across the country, and I'd ask you to reflect on the territory from which you're joining us and perhaps the history of which you are a part. Thanks. I'm going to review our agenda in just a minute, but before I do, I'd like to turn it over to Elder Carl Fontaine of the Saugeen First Nation, who has graciously agreed to lead us in an opening prayer to help us begin in a good way. Carl, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Carl Fontaine. My Indian native name is Naugijik, which means the middle of the sky. And I'm a Ojibwe from Manitoba territory, and we're part of Treaty 1, and we also have an interest in that area in Whiteshell. That's part of our traditional area. But I want to start with an opening prayer. I think we all, need some spiritual guidance in whatever we do when we have these meetings. But I want to say the prayer in our language. Then I'll probably leave the meeting after I say the prayer, because I have to go out of town and pick up somebody in my community. Anyways, I'd like to say, Kchimi Wish Women Kina Nishiega Bet the Bedmani Madzien. Ambaxwenandish Mananongum Chimamu Imamu Biang Kina Nish Jamanet Webe Madasit Uma Imamu Bit. Quick Kegu Chusake Kumanongum. Mamu piot mi bakswena man ngom Germany to Bogoge mishum sinanik no kumenanik wabanong shamanong diagabe onong get nong evi not be jin Scottish we be mal sit quick to sick negego mi bakswena man ngom taking in mama nan inanishka megaminat we be mal sit chum that is it chum de wish it chum mad is it me give me gweshkit and then mama nan. Oh yeah, me Buxunan Kagin was Beijing Scott Webe Mazet. Oh, this Kishimi Gwesh did him. Oh, me Gwesh. Oh, I just want to interpret it what I said in a little bit, okay? I'm not going to go over into fine detail, but first of all, I acknowledge the Creator, okay? We call God. Then I asked him, to come and be with us, to teach us and to love us. Then I also asked him for our spirit guides from all the directions, from the east, south, west, north, and also Mother Earth, for thanking her for giving us the sustenance that we need in order to survive on Earth, like the food, the medicines, everything. Okay, that's the prayer that I just said in my language. I really appreciate saying this prayer for all of us, and certainly, the guidance will be there by the spirit guides and all that. And hopefully everything turns out good at this meeting, at this assembly. Okay, Shimi Gwech, and I thank you all. So I'm going to be leaving this, and I'm going to be shutting down my computer. I'm going to be having to go to Sagging to go pick up somebody that needs to come into Winnipeg. Okay, so but certainly I'll probably hear about it anyway by some of the CNL representatives as I go along here as to what happened at this gathering. Okay.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you. Thank you very much, Elder Fontaine. We appreciate it, and drive safe. So before we go any further, our custom here at AECL is to begin every meeting with a safety briefing. Of course, we're not all here. We're all over across the country, wherever we happen to be. So I'll just ask you to take a moment to locate your nearest fire exit. For those of us in the room, it's the big door that you're looking at right now. Now I'm going to go through our agenda. Our agenda for this evening is pretty straightforward. It consists of two parts. First, we're going to have a presentation that consists of a series of remarks from AECL leadership, talking about the results from the past year, achievements, highlights, impressions, etc. And those presentations are going to be in sequence from Jim Burpee, the chair of the AECL Board of Directors, Fred DeMarker, the president and CEO of AECL, Amy Gotchling, who's the vice president of Science, Technology, and Commercial Oversight, Alistair McDonald, vice president of Decommissioning and Waste Management, and Alistair's joining us from Scotland, so thank you, Alistair, for burning the midnight oil for this one. And finally, Kathleen Heppel-Macy's, who is the Vice President of Nuclear Operations Oversight. The 5 of them are going to go through a presentation, as I said, highlighting some of the achievements of AECL. And then following that, we'll get into the second part of our meeting, and that's a questions and answers section. We're going to take questions from you, the audience, and you can submit those via the streaming platform that you're watching on right now. You can submit those questions in French or English, whatever language you choose, and we'll endeavor to answer those. Now, it may be the case that we get some more detailed or complex questions that we can't address in this forum, but we do have a commitment to get you written answers for any questions that require a more technical response, and we'll do that. I should also mention that we're recording this meeting and we're going to post it on YouTube. We'll send out a notification once this meeting is finished. So anyone who's not here, who'd like to see what happened here, can view the meeting on that platform. And if you had a great time and you want to watch it all over again, you can watch it twice as well. I think that's about it in terms of my introduction. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the chair of the AECL Board of Directors, Jim Burpee, to begin our presentations for the evening. Jim?
Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening, everyone. Please allow me to begin this evening by first congratulating the entire management team, many of whom are with us tonight. You are leading us with confidence and passion to an exciting time when nuclear is no longer whispered, but hailed as a solution to many of our environmental and healthcare concerns. And to AECL's workforce, it is a small but mighty team working to ensure that Canada's nuclear future remains bright. I thank you too for the long hours and absolute dedication. As chair of AECL's Board of Directors, I'd like to explain the board structure and role. First, AECL is a Crown corporation, meaning we are owned by the Canadian government, but we operate at arm's length. This distance allows us to achieve our goals through commercial practices and through the work of Canadian nuclear laboratories, private sector efficiencies. Our board is made up of 7 members appointed by the Government of Canada, and together we have 4 duties: to provide strategic direction to AECL's management, to safeguard the company's resources, to monitor its performance, and to report that performance to Parliament. I would like to remind you of AECL's mandate. It is to enable nuclear science and technology and to protect the environment by fulfilling the Government of Canada's radioactive waste and decommissioning responsibilities. And from my vantage point as chair of the board, I would also like to point out what I consider to be the highlights of their delivery on this mandate. AECL is committed to remediating contaminated sites, the results of years of research into and production of clean energy technologies and life-saving health breakthroughs such as medical isotopes. In order to keep inventing, we have to safely and efficiently deal with our past, and we are doing that. The near-surface disposal facility, an important part of that remediation, has been slow to launch, but early this summer, the CNSC held another round of hearings into our projects, and we now await its approval, fingers crossed, so we can get this facility up and running. Late last October, we capped the mound on the Port Granby Waste Management Facility and are continuing to work on the Port Hope facility. We are moving forward on this issue, and our Vice President of Decommissioning and Waste Management will have more on this shortly. As for enabling nuclear science and technology, that is top of mind for us right now, because we know that managing Canadian nuclear laboratories well is key to this part of our mandate. We are in the midst of a rigorous process to renew the contract to run Canadian nuclear laboratories. Back in 2015, the Government of Canada made the decision to deliver the nuclear mandate through a government-owned, contractor-operated model. The goal was to allow us to bring in international experts who could incorporate best practices and innovative approaches to enable cost savings, efficiently carry out environmental remediation, and continue to generate new ideas. Canadian Nuclear Laboratories was formed to manage and operate AECL sites. AECL still owns the sites, facilities, assets, intellectual property, and responsibility for environmental remediation and radioactive waste management. This arrangement has worked well over the years, attracting the best talent for our projects and injecting private sector rigor into our operations, budgets, and timelines. The GOCO contract, the people who run Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, must be renewed, and we have launched a competitive procurement process to make sure we have the best leaders in place to continue CNL's management and operation. We will have that new contract and renewed leadership by 2025. We're making sure we have the right people in place. In nuclear, as in any evolving technology, very little happens in a vacuum. The key to enabling nuclear science is collaboration, people coming together to build on each other's ideas. Over the last year, AECL has brought together domestic and international partners, academic, government, and commercial. We have put memorandum of understanding in place with more than half a dozen academic institutions. We have forged partnerships with private sector companies such as Global First Power to further our work together on small modular reactors. With the German company ITM Isotope Technologies to produce actinium-225 in our targeted alpha therapies research. And we have made great strides in growing relationships with Indigenous nations, communities, and organizations. I am especially proud to point out the recent long-term relationship agreement we have signed in June this year with the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation. It has been an inventive and productive year for AECL. I'll be happy to answer questions when my colleagues have finished their presentations. Now back to our moderator, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Jim. And as you mentioned, AECL is focused on growing relationships with Indigenous communities this year, and that's where the President and CEO of AECL, Fred DeMarker, would like to begin his address tonight. So I'll turn the microphone over to him. Fred?
Okay, thank you very much, Jim and Jeremy, and miigwech to Carl Fontaine for the opening prayer. And yes, that's exactly where I would like to start my presentation this evening. Before I tell you about that long-term relationship agreement, I have to tell you first that I've learned so much about the perspectives of First Nations since coming into role almost 3 years ago. I am always humbled as I listen to their extensive knowledge of the land, their traditional territories, the rich culture, the history, and the knowledge of the animals, the plants, the air, and the waterways. We are on a journey of reconciliation, and we are making progress in healing. We're committed to building trust founded on transparency, on respect, and on partnership. These values will support collaboration through long-term relationship agreements, such as the one Jim just mentioned with the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, or AOPFN. In these last few years of conversations, I've learned that we achieve better outcomes when Indigenous knowledge complements Western science. For example, this agreement will establish a working group to create the Nea Waboon, or Guardian program. There will be regular AOPFN monitoring presence at designated AECL sites, together with other environmental, cultural, and economic activities and programs. The first priority is setting up a pilot project at the proposed near-surface disposal facility site, or NSDF, to establish monitoring parameters for the Guardians throughout all phases of the proposed project. The goal is to build capacity to increase participation and ensure that AOPFN knowledge is integrated into all aspects of our work at the Chalk River site, to restore the lands at Chalk River Labs, and together to build a vision for the future. This journey of reconciliation goes further than Chalk River. Back in August, we met with the Saugeen First Nations chief, E.J. Fontaine, and several members of council. We listened as they told us of their history and experiences, providing context for their community's interests and their concerns about the decommissioning and restoration at the Whiteshell Lab site. We have also been working with the First Nation to increase on-site participation and monitoring activities, and we've signed an agreement to support the development of Nigan Aki, a community-led environmental monitoring program. And in mid-September, we signed an updated agreement with Saugeen that includes funding for a community-led healing and resiliency action plan. There's much work ahead and much, much more to learn from one another, but we've made a good start on building trust. As Jim mentioned, our collaboration extends further. It extends right into the name of the newest finished structure at Chalk River Labs, the Science Collaboration Center. We officially opened it last month, and we're proud to get those doors open to attract the best and the brightest to Chalk River Labs. This new building is designed to encourage collaboration, to set the conditions to foster innovation. It enables us to be open and welcoming to others and their ideas. We've also broken ground on the next phase of Chalk River's new vision, the Advanced Nuclear Materials Research Center, or ANMRC. Once finished, it will be one of the largest research facilities in Canada. I'll leave the details on that building and the entire site revitalization initiative to our Vice President of Operations, Kathleen Heppel-Massis, who will speak in a few minutes. Mais permettez-moi de vous dire que cet effort
But
considérable
let me say that this extensive effort to clean up Chalk River Labs and build anew is making the labs a place where innovation happens. This effort will enable AECL to continue to fulfill its role of bridging the gap between fundamental research in an academic context and commercial-ready research.
Often, transformational ideas fall by the wayside in that transition from low technology readiness level, which means ideas that aren't quite mature or ready for market. And we're trying to nurture them, to bridge them to maturity, to have them market ready. One of our most productive collaborations is with other federal government departments. We're incredibly proud of the work carried out under the Federal Nuclear Science and Technology Program, or FNST. This work enables nuclear-related science and technology to support core federal priorities in the areas of health, environment, safety, security, and energy, all while maintaining the necessary capabilities and expertise of Canadian nuclear labs. The FNST team has just wound up a 5-day workshop to showcase the work undertaken in the last year. The workshop was attended by about 800 participants, our largest gathering ever, and covered a broad range of topics directly and indirectly related to nuclear science and technology. The topics ranged from the use of hydrogen as a non-emitting energy source, to understanding the implications of radiation on living things, to the examination of new nuclear technologies, such as small modular reactors, to solutions for managing the waste and byproducts of nuclear-related activities. Amy Gottschling, our VP of Science, Technology, and Commercial Oversight, will have more on our FNST program and our pursuit of science and technology research. I've spoken about the revitalization of the Chalk River campus. I'd like to emphasize that as we revitalize, we also clean up, we decommission, we remediate, and we find ways to manage the waste. Dealing with a legacy of radioactive waste from our past allows us to move into the future. I admit one of our most important projects, the near-surface disposal facility, has been a challenge. This facility is a key element of our revitalization of the Chalk River campus and a key element of our ability to move into the future. The proposed NSDF will allow for the environmental remediation and local, long-term, safe disposal of low-level radioactive waste currently in temporary storage on site. The CNSC convened a public hearing this summer, which built upon the public hearings that took place last year. The intent of the latest hearing was to provide some interveners, notably 2 First Nations communities, additional time to study the proposal and share their perspectives. It's a complex project, And we are, as I've mentioned, working hard to build stronger relationships with Indigenous nations. So these hearings allowed for more discussion with these communities. Getting the NSDF approved has been a learning experience for all of us. And I have no doubt that the NSDF project will be a success because it builds upon our experience with other waste management projects that we have successfully undertaken. For example, last October, we celebrated the capping of the Port Granby Waste Management Facility, which has many similarities to the NSDF in its design and in its size. And we are well on our way to completing another major cleanup initiative at Port Hope. Looking back a few years, as part of an agreement between Prime Minister Harper and President Obama, we completed the repatriation of 161 kilograms of highly enriched uranium to the United States. This involved transporting the material over the Canada-US border and through one province and 7 states, a feat never attempted before. A project most people didn't realize was underway until it was completed. It took nearly a decade of meticulous planning and innovative thinking to overcome the technical and logistical challenges involved, including the design and development of a dedicated facility to safely retrieve and then package the material. So yes, we do know how to deal with waste of all kinds. But I have to admit, sometimes we don't get it right. Work was paused earlier this year at our Whiteshell site in Manitoba when deficiencies in emergency staffing and protocols came to light. Although I'm not pleased that this happened, I am pleased with how quickly and aggressively CNL responded. We, and I mean the collective we, CNL and AECL, learned a lot from that discovery, and we're now stronger for it. Alistair MacDonald, our VP of Waste Management and Decommissioning, will have more to say on this issue and other aspects of our environmental remediation mandate. Now, as I wind up my remarks to you this evening, I'd like to remind you of one of AECL's, in fact, one of Canada's most successful inventions, and that's the CANDU reactor. It's an important part of our history as a Tier 1 nuclear nation, but it's also a crucial player in Canada's and the world's clean energy future. CANDU technology continues to supply Ontario with 60% of its electricity and supplies New Brunswick with about 1/3 of its electricity. Overall, CANDUs provide 15% of Canada's electricity needs. We have 19 CANDUs in operation in Canada, with 9 more CANDU reactors in operation in 5 other countries worldwide. CANDUs have demonstrated exceptional performance. For example, the Cernavoda 2 reactor, a CANDU 6 operating reactor in Romania, was the top performing reactor in the world based upon capacity factor for the decade ending December 31, 2021. In countries that operate both CANDU and non-CANDU reactors, such as Korea and China, CANDU is the top performer in those countries based upon the 10-year average capacity factor ending in December 2021. Confidence in CANDU technology is strong. For example, OPG and Bruce Power are partway through a $26 billion refurbishment of 10 CANDU reactors, one of the largest infrastructure projects in Canada. And OPG is examining the refurbishment of 4 more CANDU reactors at its Pickering site. Altogether, this means that we'll have CANDU supplying clean energy well into the 2060s. With the prospect for new CANDU, we could see CANDUs operating in Canada until the end of this century and beyond. Confidence in CANDU extends beyond Canada. A few weeks ago, the Government of Canada announced it will support Romania's clean energy future by making available up to $3 billion in export financing for the refurbishment of Cernavoda Unit 1 and the construction of 2 new CANDU reactors to add to Cernavoda's already impressive fleet. We have a great technology in the CANDU reactor. It's been successful at home and abroad. It has unique attributes no other reactor has. And we continue to invest in it. We continue to keep it modern. We continue to make it better. It provides a solid foundation for a strong nuclear future. I'm happy to end on such a positive note. I look forward to your questions. Thank you. And now back to our moderator, Jeremy Latta.
Thank you very much, Fred. And now I'd like to turn to our Vice President of Science, Technology, and Commercial Oversight, Amy Gotchling. Amy?
Thank you, Fred and Jeremy. I'm quite happy that Fred ended by talking about CANDU, the pinnacle of nuclear innovation in Canada, because I'm here to talk about how we intend to keep sparking exactly that kind of innovation. We have already heard that collaboration is key, how AECL is bringing together nuclear players, both domestic and international. We are building partnerships around the world, seeking out companies and research organizations who are advancing ambitious new technologies that are in our national interest. We can apply our expertise to help bring their technologies to life here in Canada. And we focus very heavily on partnerships in Canada. We at AECL are an integral part of the Canadian nuclear industry, and we value those strategic partnerships and driving innovation together in Canada. But we also want to attract international partners who can bring economic benefit to Canada. For instance, we've signed an agreement with Korea's Atomic Energy Research Institute to collaborate on nuclear science and technology, especially in the field of small modular reactors. We have partnered with Kyoto Fusioneering, a Japanese technology company, to accelerate the development of fusion energy systems. The German firm ITM has joined us to increase production of actinium-225, a rare medical isotope that shows so much promise in the fight against cancer by targeted alpha therapy. And we've struck a partnership agreement with the UK's National Nuclear Laboratory to spur collaboration on clean energy, medical isotopes, and waste management. As you can see, we've looked far and wide for partnerships that can drive creative research. We are building an ecosystem of innovation. And as I noted before, we focus also on building those ecosystems with Canadian partnerships. This year, we've forged agreements with Canadian universities and academic institutions. The University of New Brunswick, McMaster University, Ontario Tech University, the University of Ottawa, Western University, and Waterloo. And there's more to come. The idea here is to advance our collective research into areas such as health and environmental sciences, clean energy, and nuclear safety and security. These closer relationships will enable knowledge mobilization, spur innovation, and develop intellectual property. These agreements allow us to bring into our labs the nuclear researchers, engineers, and scientists of the future. We will provide professional development for the next generation, and at the same time, it allows us to share our collective knowledge. We're building bench strength, and we're going to need it. AECL and Canadian nuclear laboratories are becoming indispensable to Canadians. Our best indicator of that, as Fred mentioned, is the Federal Nuclear Science and Technology Work Plan. This is where we intersect with our federal partners and support core federal roles, responsibilities, and priorities. The Federal Nuclear Science and Technology Work Plan supports 14 federal departments and agencies in the areas of health, nuclear safety and security, energy, and the environment. It is AECL's job to engage with our federal family to develop this program of work that meets their needs. So let me give you some examples of the work we're doing under this plan. We are doing research to better understand the beneficial effects of low doses of radiation on human health, including on colon cancer. We are considering the role that oxygen toxicity plays in the development of cataracts. That doesn't sound very nuclear, but it all has to do with the development of cataracts in a spacecraft, where space radiation affects the oxygen level of an astronaut's environment. We are conducting research into managing waste from the new generation of nuclear reactors, the small modular reactors. And we are helping various government departments develop skills in detecting and measuring radiation. This is a vital aspect of nuclear safety and security. Those are just a handful of the projects we have underway that help support the work of other agencies and departments within the Government of Canada. I'd like to add in closing that the research we're conducting at AECL and CNL isn't strictly nuclear, or at least not the way you might think of nuclear, as in reactors, uranium, and so on. It's also about hydrogen, which can be used as a fuel for combustion engines. It's difficult to store, so we're looking at ways of storing and managing hydrogen safely and as a solid within a metal. It's also about fusion, that long promised but not yet realized potential source of energy that, like nuclear, produces no greenhouse gases and has abundant fuel supplies while producing no radioactive waste. This innovation is also about cybersecurity, exploring solutions for the protection of nuclear power plants and other critical infrastructure. This is an incredibly exciting time we're living in, and the potential of our work at AECL to make an impact on our world is limitless. Thank you for your time, and I'll turn the proceedings back over to our moderator, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Amy. And now, using the magic of these virtual meetings, we're going to head across the pond to Scotland to hear from our Vice President of Decommissioning and Waste Management, Alistair McDonald. Alistair, over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks to all my colleagues who have sketched out a picture tonight of the tasks we are undertaking across AECL's waste management and decommissioning portfolio. It is a vast responsibility, and it includes the decommissioning of the Gentilly 1 reactor in Quebec, the reactor at Whiteshell in Manitoba, along with the supporting facilities and waste management area, reactors at Douglas Point and Rolfton, the Port Hope Area Initiative, and across the site at Chalk River to enable us to revitalise these laboratories and to deal with the old waste management areas. Safely managing waste liabilities and decommissioning out-of-date structures is often viewed as a negative part of the mandate given to us by the Government of Canada. Keep in mind, as Jim mentioned earlier, this material was produced as a result of nuclear science and technology activities over the past decades, which included, for example, the development of the clean energy technologies that Fred mentioned, such as CANDU reactor and research and production of life-saving medical isotopes. Waste is an inevitable part of our work and one we must manage in order to make way for the future. And that's exactly why we need the Near Surface Disposal Facility, or NSDF. The NSDF will provide us with a safe and efficient way to deal with the low-level radioactive waste that has accumulated over these decades. Waste such as contaminated soils, building materials from decommissioning activities of old labs, mop heads, protective clothing, all that needs to be dealt with. This low-level waste is 98% of our waste inventory, so gaining approval to build that facility will go far to effectively enable us to reduce our entire legacy. As has been mentioned earlier, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission convened another public meeting held this summer, and we now await the decision of the commissioners on this project. I'd also like to add tonight that we are pleased with the publication of the Integrated Strategy for Radioactive Waste, which was accepted by the Minister of Natural Resources last week. Implementation of this strategy will enable the industry to address gaps in waste disposal planning across Canada. AECL fully supports this strategy and associated recommendations, and we are ready to continue to work. We are ready to continue to work to ensure that Canada has a solution for intermediate level waste. Continuing with our work at Chalk River Laboratories, we continue to decommission a wide range of unused facilities and structures by removing, sorting, and segregating material within these buildings. We are working as efficiently as possible, but keep in mind we're building an inventory of low-level waste without having a suitable long-term solution at the moment. We have also started to characterize some of the areas containing legacy contamination, and we're now considering options for how we can deal with those areas. We are very keen to make progress in the decommissioning of the waste management area B at Chalk River, which will involve the remediation of materials stored in underground trenches, bunkers, and tile holes, about 6,000 in total. This will involve retrieval and stabilization of material into products that are suitable for long-term storage and ultimately disposal. We expect this project will require an environmental assessment, and it will be our first designated project under the new Impact Assessment Act. We are encouraging early engagement by CNL with stakeholders and First Nations to inform them about the project, increase broad understanding of the issues we are facing, and to help to develop and get input to deal with a solution to deal with this waste management area. At Port Hope, you can really see that significant work has been going on over the course of the year on several fronts: the harbour, Highland Drive, Lions Park, to name but a few sites. I'm pleased to report that work is complete in the vicinity of the viaducts. I'm looking forward to the CNSC and federal and municipal agencies considering CNL's proposal to change the cleanup criteria regarding arsenic. This will allow us to be much more efficient and effective in answering the concerns of many residents who say we've been taking too long, especially in chasing arsenic. I'm happy with the progress that CNL and other suppliers are making in Cambridge, Ontario, to build and test the standpipe and bunker waste retrieval system. This is needed at Whiteshell to retrieve waste from a smaller number of standpipes at that site. I do have to say, however, as Fred mentioned, how disappointed we were when CNL discovered several non-compliances at Whiteshell in the training and certification of the fire protection team, as well as some deficiencies in the infrastructure and equipment at that site. When this came to light, CNL responded quickly and has put in place measures to remedy these areas of non-compliance. This has been a wake-up call for us all, and CNL have reviewed their compliance across all regulatory requirements over all their sites and put measures in place to minimise the risk of something like this happening in the future. At the MPD reactor in Rofton, we continue to engage with Indigenous nations to help refine the environmental assessment submission for the proposed decommissioning of the underground structures there. And at the reactor sites in both Douglas Point and Gentilly, we are currently removing waste from inactive buildings. We have, however, asked CNL to develop plans seeking to accelerate the decommissioning, targeting 2035 for the completion of both projects. And a final note, following a recommendation by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, we have updated the inventory records of radioactive waste owned by AECL, and these are now published on our website. This update reflects our growing ability to be more precise in these inventories as more waste areas are cleaned up and remediated, and also more transparent and open with our information. Our capacity to safely and efficiently manage radioactive waste gets better and better as we further our work to uncover the legacy of the past, and as the capability and capacity of the workforce at CNL and across the supply chain grows, we are proud of the work they are doing. Thank you. And now back to our moderator, Jeremy. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And now for our last speaker of the evening, Kathleen Heppel-Macy's, our Vice President of Nuclear Operations Oversight. Kathleen?
Thanks very much, Jeremy. In our day-to-day roles, my team and I provide oversight of CNL's activities related to the execution of ongoing safe, secure, and environmentally sustainable operations, and we oversee the management of infrastructure and assets. Working on our sites is very exciting. The work is unique, diversified, and complex. Every day presents new issues for our attention, and we have to be on our toes. Nous devons nous prouver à nous-mêmes, de même qu'à tous nos
We have to prove to ourselves, as well as to our staff and the members of the public, that we can do our job safely at all times. Our nuclear facilities and nuclear materials must be properly safeguarded and used. In addition, we must ensure that we protect the environment properly and meet all the international obligations to which Canada is committed.
Our sites are located in some of the most beautiful locations in the world, and that our work is carried out in the habitat of a rich variety of plants and animal species. In conducting our operations, we are committed to carry out our work in harmony with the local environment, ensuring the protection of biodiversity that inhabit our sites, meaning the unique variety of plants, animals, insect, and aquatic life for our future generations. AECL has direct oversight and monitors key performance indicators across health, safety, security, sustainability, and environmental performance, with noted progress in safety results specifically related to injury statistics. In the last 2 years, CNL safety performance in the area of worker injuries and injury severity has been among the very lowest as compared to the many similar American-based nuclear research and decommissioning sites. We have seen continuous improvement in safety performance across the spectrum, including industrial safety, nuclear safety, radiation protection, and workforce health and wellness. Let me share with you just one little example of how CNL has achieved such strong safety performance. Every morning, precisely at 8:30, CNL has a rapid morning call to bring up any events that might have taken place the days before. They are shared and discussed promptly to ensure everyone is aware of any hazards or lessons learned. As an invited guest to a workshop with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which focused on improving risk culture, I shared this ritual. A reporter from the Financial Times highlighted this as a best practice that the bank sector should also consider for their building of a healthy risk culture. When you get that kind of seal of approval from the Financial Times, you must be on the right track. CNL is also focused on increasing workforce engagement around safety, most notably through the creation of a safety excellence team. This team creates a challenge function and is engaging all sectors at the site and at all working levels to bring safety to the forefront of decision-making. Most recently, we've had an independent Canadian expert conducting a new and innovative assessment on psychological safety at CNL. This looks at how safe our people feel in raising issues, and the results will allow us to remove any blind spots we may have in this area. CNL has also hosted the World Institute of Nuclear Security, known as WINS, to conduct a security culture assessment, another example of how AECL is driving good culture through its oversight role. I mentioned earlier that we uphold Canada's international obligations. We ensure that all nuclear material is accounted for, declared, and verified. In that regard, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, known as the IAEA, inspects our sites and validates through very rigorous verifications that we meet these obligations. This past summer, the head of the IAEA Safeguards Deputy Director General Max Aparo visited our Chalk River site and was very impressed by how our process of safeguarding nuclear material is well executed. Turning to my other function, regarding the oversight of infrastructures and assets. AECL and CNL have tools to ensure that we are building a sustainable campus, that these buildings, labs, and other assets are effectively managed. we have made significant progress in advancing our asset management program in line with ISO standards. The rigorous approach is key to better managing the overall asset inventory based on factors such as asset age, condition assessment, and asset care. This helps us coordinate effective strategies to asset maintenance, replacement, or upgrades. Such structured approach is key in preparing the next proposed 10-year investment plan. And yes, thanks to the Government of Canada $1.3 billion investment, the revitalization of the Chalk River site is moving ahead with some stunning achievements, turning the decade-old site into a true world-class nuclear science and technology campus. I say stunning because anyone familiar with the old site would be awed by the changes we've made. We've torn down, we've improved, and we've built new. Here are a few examples of our new builds. First, the Minwamin building that serves as the visitor entrance and logistics warehouse. This building has unique sustainability features, which include being made of mass timber, which has inherent fire-resistant qualities, making it meet and often exceed fire safety standards in Canadian building codes. The newly opened Science Collaboration Center, as mentioned by Fred, is designed as the lab's central planning and collaboration space. It features 44 meeting rooms, a library, and 200-seat theater. It too was built from mass timber. We hope next year to hold this public meeting in that venue and to see you in person. Last December, we broke ground on the Advanced Nuclear Material Research Center, soon to be home to 23 laboratories. It is one of the largest investments in nuclear science and technology infrastructure in Canada. It is an exciting time to be working in the field of nuclear science and technology. We see growth every day at the Chalk River campus, new clean energy and health technologies being invented in these new buildings. We are dedicated in ensuring that safety is a paramount priority and coexists in all that we do, and that safety culture is fostered alongside our future activities. Our rigorous and innovative ways of thinking are grounded in an overall culture that protects and will protect workers, the public, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, and Amy, and Alistair, and Fred, and Jim. And that brings us to the end of the presentation section of our agenda. Thank you all. So now I'm going to open up the floor to questions and answers. So if you are joining us online and you do have a question, you can pop it into the chat via the platform that you're watching on, and we'll put it into the queue. I've got a few to get to, so without any further ado, we'll get started. The first question is for you, Jim, as the chair of the board. The question is, given that we're nearing the end of the first 10-year contract under the GOCO model, that's government-owned contractor-operated model, can you speak to your perspective on how it's working, its effectiveness, its efficiency? What are your thoughts as you look back from your perspective as the chair of the board?
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I mean, we've heard tonight a lot of exceptional things that were delivered in the past year. But I look at this, I step back and look at what has really happened since 2015. So if I consider all the work done at the Chalk River site, the buildings that are down, the new ones that are up, the renewal of the site, the work at Port Hope, and the board was there last month and had a tour of Port Hope, and it's a very, very impressive project with work going a lot of places and not easy. The support that we've been doing for the Federal Nuclear Science and Technology Program and things like targeted alpha therapy, and supporting the ongoing nuclear fleet, which has always been a critical role at Chalk River and remains so. We couldn't have done all that without the GOCO. And, there's two parts to that equation. The first part is CNEA. We have not talked about Specifically, the Canadian Nuclear Energy Alliance is the shareholder of Canadian Nuclear Labs since 2015, and that's what's up for renewal of the well, not renewal of the reprocurement of that contract for 2025. But their main function is to provide people, resources, methodology. We call them reach back resources, but more specifically than that, they provide capabilities, expertise, people that cover areas that we just didn't have. So without that, a lot of this work wouldn't have happened. I mean, that's just bluntly what the reality is. But that's only, I said, half the equation. The other half is AECL itself and Fred and his team and what they've delivered. So very focused oversight that's provide and always ensuring that there's value for Canada in the work done. And that sort of is the mantra, that is there value in the work being done. They have incredibly good oversight programs put in place. They're a very effective process in terms of setting objectives. We don't tell CNL how to get the work done, but we tell them what we're looking for, the results, the endpoints. They make a proposal that we eventually agree on, and then we monitor them, measure them, and we hold them accountable to deliver. And, you know, I've seen a lot of different contractual models over my history, but this is the first one I've seen work so effectively, where the right people and resources have been brought in to solve some pretty difficult problems. And there were other new ways of approaching problems and fixing things, but it only worked because the focused oversight that was provided by AECL.
Thank you very much, Jim. Fred, I wonder if you want to also jump in and add some perspectives on your thoughts on the performance of the GOCO model as we head into the reprocurement of the contract after its first 10 years.
Yeah, well, I think Jim gave a great answer actually regarding the GOCO model, and and I'm not just saying that because you're the chair, Jim, but I think you did. A couple of things I'd like to add. The model is very unique. I mean, I've been working with contracts for decades and in previous roles, but this is truly a unique model, and it is very effective. The second thing, in order to make it effective, there really needs to be a strong sense of trust between both CNL and AECL. So we need to treat each other in a respectful way, in an open way, so that, and that's what makes it work, a really important part of what makes it work. So the relationship aspect across all levels between AECL and CNL, as well as strong alignment within each organization. So for example, if I say one thing and one of my VPs says a different thing, we confuse the organization at CNL. And so it's vital for us to also be very disciplined and very aligned within our own organization to ensure that all this works. Like a well-played symphony, every part of it has to be in harmony with the rest to make it effective. And finally, I would just add to what Jim said about what's been accomplished. I first visited the Chalk River site in 1981, and I've been going back over the years, and the site today is remarkable, and much of that change has been achieved since the start of the GOCO. Part of that is because the government had confidence in us to give us a 10-year budget, so we were able to plan for the long term. They gave us an investment of $1.3 billion to revitalize the site, and they gave us a very good model through the GOCO. So I would just add that in summarizing some reflections on the last 8 years or so, Jeremy.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And I might use my moderator's privilege here to sort of continue that discussion and zoom out a bit. That question was really about the performance specifically of this contractual model, but I wonder if I might pose to both of you again a similar question, but more broadly about the state of the sector. And that is, in a lot of the discussion that we've heard this evening in the presentations and just generally when talking about nuclear in Canada, I think there's a good deal of excitement and optimism about the sector. We've seen Ontario's announcement to invest in large nuclear and in SMRs. There's plans for SMRs elsewhere in the country. We talked about the federal investment in Romania. So it feels like there's some momentum gathering around the industry. I wonder, as two folks with careers worth of experience in the nuclear sector, what are your reflections on how you see the state of the sector as it is today? And will Canada be ready to seize the apparent opportunity before it? What do you think? Jim?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll start with a slightly broader, even broader perspective because my experience is electricity more broadly than just nuclear. So I've been in electricity business for 46 years. I started as a graduate engineer at a coal burning station outside of Toronto, Lakeview in 1977. And but since then, I've managed all aspects of generation, whether I've been in nuclear a few times, hydroelectric, you name it. Biomass gasification, but we don't have enough time for that. Electricity is a complex business, very complex, and usually not recognized by people. But and nuclear within that is a very complex technology, which Fred could talk about. But electricity for many years, up until certainly into the 90s, was about reliability at a reasonable cost. Environmental concerns growing through the 90s, climate change, first discussions in the mid-90s, and I've been involved with them since about 93. But now we're at a point that it's not just about reliability and cost, but it's about changing the energy system. It's a massive transformation to net zero. And I think a lot of people don't realize how big that is and what's required to do it. And we've always found in electricity, you can never rely on one technology. You need a diversity of technologies. There is strength in diversity. And the fact our performance within Canada today on the electricity side in terms of climate performance is very powerful. And a lot of that, it's not only hydroelectric, but a lot of that is nuclear, especially in Ontario and New Brunswick, as Fred mentioned. And there's just no way to transform the energy system without a greater role for nuclear. You've got to keep the existing units in place, running technologies, and we need to develop new ones. And it won't be one technology. Fred is obviously very big and passionate about can-do, as you heard, and that's right. And there's a huge opportunity, but SMRs will have a role down the road, and fusion, again, and a lot of people not realize, but there's capability at the Chalk River site that supports fusion and the fueling of it, because you're getting into deuterium and tritium, which we know quite a bit about and are used to handling. So the energy transformation is happening, will continue to happen. We can debate the rate at which it happens, but it's going to see an increased role for nuclear for sure, or else you just can't get there. Again, and this comes from a person, I bought my first EV in 2014, so I'm on my third one now, and great lover of EVs, but I'm quite pleased to see a lot more on the road, but that's a small bit. And when you look at, I will admit that I still burn natural gas in my house. So, when you look at going all the way to net zero, it's a long way to go. Electricity is a key part of that. Nuclear is a key part of electricity.
Terrific. Thanks, Jim. Fred, what are your thoughts looking at the sector overall and reflecting on what Jim's had to say and your thoughts given your experience in the sector?
Yeah, I would say this is probably the most exciting time for nuclear since I started. When I look back between around 1970 and 1993, here in Canada, we put online 22 nuclear reactors, 20 in Ontario, one in Quebec, and one in New Brunswick. And it was amazing. And I happened to join in 1981, which is almost smack dab right in the middle of that midpoint. And I had the opportunity to start the operation of Pickering A, and then commissioning of Pickering B, supported the commissioning of Bruce B, and then was involved in the commissioning of all the Darlington units. So it was a very exciting time at that time, but I've never seen it as exciting as it is right now. Now, having said that, there's a lot of excitement, but And we've accomplished a lot in getting nuclear on the agenda, because for the longest time, there was no discussion of nuclear. And it's really only in the last couple of years that people are talking about nuclear, that they're talking about CANDU once again. And as Jim said, SMRs are a critical part of that energy mix. About a year ago, when we started talking about large, in addition to SMRs, I said large or small, we need them all, and that is absolutely still true. And there are different reactors for different applications, and they all fulfill a different role. The one thing they have in common is they're emission-free. And the CANDUs that we have operating in Canada today have helped us to avoid about 2,500 megatons of CO2, which, to put in perspective, Canada produces about 700 megatons of CO2 every year. So it really puts into perspective how much nuclear has contributed to avoiding emission. But I will tell you, the biggest challenge, it wasn't getting nuclear on the discussion table. The biggest challenge is actually delivering. And there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to deliver. So when I talk about those 20 years or so where we built 22 reactors, we had in place a very significant infrastructure between what Ontario Hydro was doing in terms of developing operators, maintainers, engineers, between what AECL was doing in terms of developing nuclear science and technology capabilities, and through various different reactors and reactor designs, and between what the supply chain was doing and what the university network was doing. So all that, or something similar, needs to be recreated in order for us to be able to move successfully forward and deliver on the excitement that's been generated so far. And it won't be easy, and it will require a huge amount of collaboration across between governments, federal and provincial governments. That's what made nuclear successful the first time around, was an alliance between the feds and between the province of Ontario, executed through AECL and Ontario Hydro. We will need those kinds of partnerships between governments, between suppliers, between utilities, and so on, and with academia. And I think we're up for it. The one thing that I do see in Canada, when I look at Canada and compare it to what we see in the rest of the world, we have demonstrated the ability to work together. I was in Paris a week ago at a nuclear energy agency hosted meeting for energy ministers, and there were 20 or so countries represented, CEOs from industry, energy ministers from government. And I can tell you, Canada shone as having our program all together. And we do. We may see all the challenges that we have, but when you stand back and you look at the overall approach that's been developed, the investments the federal government has made, the commitments that the provincial government is making, the technology developments that are happening, the collaboration across the supply chain, it has been incredible, but we need to continue that momentum. And that is the biggest challenge ahead of us.
Thank you very much, Jim and Fred. And it makes me reflect for folks watching. I just joined the organization a couple of months ago, and the answers that you just saw are reflective of the wealth of experience and expertise that's guiding this organization that I've discovered as I've gotten deeper into the organization. There's a lot of knowledge and experience here. I'm going to shift gears and go to Alistair. We've got a question for you, and it's something relating to something that you'd mentioned in your presentation, which was the integrated radioactive waste strategy. And the question is, what does the new integrated radioactive waste strategy mean for the near surface disposal facility? I wonder if you could share some remarks on that.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the integrated strategy for radioactive waste was just published last week, or just endorsed by the minister last week, and it does outline an integrated national plan for the long-term management of all Canada's low-level waste intermediate level waste and non-fuel high level waste, high level radioactive waste, where there's no existing disposal plans in place. And I'm sure many are aware that the NWMO have plans in place for high level waste. It doesn't duplicate any projects that are existing. And for us specifically, I go back to the sort of two recommendations that were made in that integrated strategy. The one relates specifically to intermediate level waste and non-fuel high level waste. But the second one relates specifically to low-level waste, and it says that low-level waste will be disposed of in multiple near-surface disposal facilities. Implementation of this recommendation will be managed directly by waste generators and waste owners, and of course AECL is a waste owner. I would then say, you know, as we've mentioned previously, the NSDF, which has been proposed by CNL, is currently undergoing that thorough regulatory review process which has been led by the CNSC, and that includes an assessment of any potential effects on the environment, and it's based on science, evidence-based and Indigenous knowledge, and you know, specifically that project for us can only go ahead if it's approved by the CNSC. So Jeremy, I hope that goes some way to answering that.
Very much. And in fact, while we've got you, we have an incoming question related to what you were just talking about, which is where are we in the process with respect to the near surface disposal facility for the Chalk River site? Where are we? What are the next steps? And what happens if the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission does not approve the project?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think as Fred mentioned earlier on, the final hearing was held on earlier this year in August, and the Commission members are now deliberating with a view to coming to a decision, you know, expected sometime before the end of the calendar year. And yeah, it's possible the Commission may approve, deny, or maybe approve the project with conditions. We simply don't know at this point, but of course we'll abide by their decision. If the project is denied, however, we'll reassess options. But you know, ultimately, we know that some type of disposal facility is absolutely necessary to allow us to live up to our obligations to deal with the legacy waste that we have in Canada.
Thank you very much, Alistair. We've had a couple of questions with respect to white shell, and we've heard about white shell during the presentations. And so I want to turn to Kathleen to ask specifically about white shell. How serious is the situation there, and what has the response been? Kathleen, could you give some remarks on that?
Yes, thank you very much, Jeremy. So we do take the white shell fire protection team training and certification non-compliance extremely seriously. As I mentioned, safety is our primary concern and guides everything that we do. And so this is it's a core piece of our mandate. So any shortcoming when it comes to safety is not acceptable. And so CNL has taken big steps in addressing this issue. They've conducted a root cause analysis. They've conducted self-assessment, going line by line in terms of ensuring that all the requirements for the fire protection programs are addressed and are part of the fire protection program. So in terms of resuming operation at site, it will not happen until we are sure that that site is going to be operating safely. Furthermore, back in June, the CNL also made a comprehensive presentation to the CNSC and discussed the matter quite at length. And so for us though, at AECL, it's certainly something that we were not pleased with. We are going to draw lessons from this event, as well as in making sure that this doesn't happen in the future, and especially from a contracting perspective to see how we can address to ensure that those situations don't occur. So that's the situation here.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Next question, and it's come up as well in some of the remarks earlier. We've talked about how AECL operates in a contractual model, and we're doing a reprocurement of the contract. The question here, and Fred, maybe I could pass this to you, is when we're talking about reprocurement of the contract, what is the timeline for that process, and where are we?
Okay, well, it's probably good to start with where are we within the current contract, and the current contract ran from September 2015 to September 2025. So we're already well into what we're calling the re-procurement. That's not an English word, but we made it up, and I think it suits the purpose. The first phase of that re-procurement was to go out for a request for expression of interest. That's been completed. The second phase was, and we got the results of the expression of interest, and we reflected that in how we are proceeding with the procurement process. The second phase was a request for pre-qualification, an RFPQ, and interested proponents have submitted have submitted applications to qualify, and we're going through that process right now. Now, the next important phase and really critical phase will, by next March, we're going to be putting out the request for proposal. And we're going to be sending that out to all the qualified bidders. And we're going to be spending the next number of months evaluating the bid proposals and making the selection. We expect to have the selection made by the spring of 2025. And that will give a few months for an orderly transition between the current operators, the current people that have been charged with running CNL, the Canadian National Energy Alliance, and the transition to the successful bidder. So and we'll have that successful bidder fully in place and the transition complete by September 2025.
Terrific. Thank you, Fred. And on that subject, we're talking about re-procurement and potentially a different contractor. Question here is, what's the effect if a new bidder is successful through that contracting process that you just described? What does that mean for CNL employees?
Well, for CNL, CNL was always set up to be the enduring entity. And by enduring entity, I mean beyond any contract interval, it will continue to exist as a standalone entity. The only thing that changes is the people at the top that are running that organization. And so in that regard, if you're a CNL employee, nothing changes the day before or the day after procurement, but there will be a new management team. There will be the whole intent behind the orderly transition is to ensure that that it's exactly that it's orderly, that things are managed in a careful and thoughtful way.
Great. Thank you, Fred. We've got another question for Alistair. So stand by, Alistair. And this is coming in from the chat. The question is regarding the capping of Port Granby and the NSDF as a disposal facility. The questioner says that this comparison is misleading, that the Port Granby facility is not really a disposal facility, whereas the purpose of the NSDF is for final disposal of radioactive waste. Can Alistair please explain how the design of a waste management facility can be compared to that of a disposal facility? Alistair, could you field that?
Yeah, in essence, the facilities are very, very similar. The differences are in the waste and where the waste comes from. And in Port Hope and Port Granby, the waste is coming from the refining operations that took place in that area. And that was driven by the legal agreement between Government of Canada and the municipalities at that time. But the design of the facility is very, very similar to that which has been proposed for the NSDF at Chalk River. I think the difference this time round is, people have moved on. People realise that, to enable this work to be done properly and effectively, we need to really look at the end in mind. So, the licence is very much obviously a matter of public record, as has been talked about extensively at the CNSC hearings. The design of this has been done specifically for these wastes with the end in mind, and the intent is, seeking the licenses and the environmental assessments for the disposal of material at the NSDF at Chalk River, but from an engineering aspect, the design of the facilities are similar, just appropriate for the different wastes in the different communities. Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Alistair. All right, we're going to change gears. I've got one for Amy, who's standing ready at our podium here. Amy, your question is, why is AECL not building, testing, working on a small modular reactor using its own homegrown design?
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for this question. I really like it because what it does is acknowledge our history and legacy of successful innovation at AECL. We invented the CANDU reactor, deployed it. It's a proven technology, it's reliable, and it can be safely regulated. So this question is acknowledging the power of that as a national asset. It creates jobs, Canadian companies are supporting it through its life cycle, and it's really a return on our investment. We have to remember that SMRs are not at that same technology readiness level right now. And unfortunately, when it comes to climate change, we're in a race against time. And as Fred once famously said, time does not negotiate. So we look at our role now as a national lab and we say, what is our mandate now? It's to advance nuclear innovation for the benefit of Canada. And in this case, when time is the most critical factor, that may require us to look at technologies that are not made in Canada. How can we form partnerships? How can we collaborate to bring that to Canada, make it work for us, and still get the benefit of everything that we need? So that's the main point. That said, the question also hints that there may be a technology that we have as AECL for small reactors, and we do. It was invented in around the 1980s. We are currently looking at that technology, looking at that intellectual property. We are assessing that and trying to determine if it fits now in our marketplace and can it be deployed. The question would be, how do we get the right partners, and who would those partners be, and when and how to deploy that technology? Thanks for the question.
Thanks very much, Amy. Next, back to you, Fred. We've got one, I think you touched on some of this in your remarks, but regardless, how is AECL engaging Indigenous nations is the question for you, Fred.
Okay. Yes, I covered that quite a bit in my remarks, but let me see if I can, I'll try and add to some of what we talked about. Engaging in Indigenous nations, I talked about setting up a long-term relationship agreement, but let me elaborate on that. The agreement does write down some important principles, and it does describe how we will work together. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what we actually do in practice and how we actually work with one another. And so a really important part for me anyway, and for my team, is to build relationships, to talk, to understand the values and what's important, to understand the priorities and what's important, to not presume that we know what is most important here. And we've got a lot to learn, and we are learning as we engage through these dialogues. I don't think there's anything more important in that regard than speaking at the leadership level, speaking at the below the leadership level, and ensuring that we understand one another. Once you do that, then you can actually start bringing these long-term relationship agreements to life. And we're doing that with different communities. So I mentioned the Algonquin of Pikwakanagan. I mentioned the Saugeen First Nation. But there are others. We talked about, the question was just asked about the capping of Port Granby. That's another site where we're engaging with other First Nations that are interested in the future of that site and in the land use for that site. Each of these First Nations has different needs, different expectations. The relationship is different. The sites are different. So we need to adapt to all those differences and ensure that we establish meaningful relationships that really advance our partnerships with local Indigenous communities.
Terrific. Thank you, Fred. And I reflect on that, the nature of those relationships is really driven and defined by the unique requirements or needs of the parties and of the sites and the land, et cetera, that there's no one size fits all approach that AECL can apply. Thank you. Next question is for Kathleen. Kathleen, you mentioned the International Atomic Energy Agency and its role in guaranteeing the safety and security of our sites. The questioner is wondering, can you talk a bit more about how that works in practice? What does the IAEA, a fun acronym to say, IAEA, what does the IAEA do?
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for the question. So perhaps I can dissect your question a little bit more here. You mentioned safety and security. So the primary role for safety and for nuclear safety and nuclear security rests with CNL. So the IAEA does not do inspections in that regard. That would be on the CNSC. With respect to safeguarding nuclear material, you are correct. This would fall on the shoulders of, well, the CNSC also has a role to facilitate, but the IAEA would conduct that inspections. And let me explain to you a little bit more about that framework. So the Non-Proliferation Treaty, where Canada was among the first signatories in the 1970s, was then further added with a comprehensive safeguard agreement, and in 2004 an additional protocol, which means that we open our arms, if you will, to hosting the IAEA to conduct inspections to ensure that no nuclear material or nuclear process or activities is contributing to non-proliferations. So that's what that means. So Canada has embraced the NPT, the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, and the additional protocol. And as a result, we ensure that we account for every bit of nuclear material. We report it to the IAEA, and as a result, they are ensuring oversights, and they come and verify our declaration. So that's what it means. As well, I should say that recently, a new activity has been undertaken by the agency, the IAEA, which was a revised state-level approach, and that meant a little bit more dependency on remote monitoring and technology to hopefully give them more confidence still overall internationally about what we do. And CNL in Canada has been the very first to actually fully implement this revised state-level approach, and they are actually finding that quite useful as a result. So essentially, the IAEA does safeguards inspections. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kathleen. And a final question, perhaps. If there's any more in the chat, feel free to get them in. But I'm going to go to Amy next, and so I'll talk slowly to give you a chance to get to the podium. To Amy, the question here is, you talked about research and particularly partnering with academia in Canada, and the question is wondering, is there a focus on a particular part of the research continuum, i.e., is AECL partnering to do basic research, to do applied research with a focus on commercialization? Where are we in that continuum, or does it vary? What are your thoughts there, Amy?
Okay, thanks for the question. Remember that AECL spans the space of technology and readiness. So we do foundational R&D, but we also are in the space of deploying services, proven technologies to the industry writ large. So we can play across all areas. So what makes sense for us is to look at partnerships with the university from the discovery research lens, as well as their ability to advance innovation towards creating intellectual property. We look at colleges as important partners because they do applied research, that hands-on learning, and they're really tightly connected to the workforce and skilled trades. And one of the things we also need, most importantly, that spans both university and colleges, is building of the talent pool. So there are different areas in which we want to work with universities and colleges. An important point is that we are looking to create these partnerships at an institutional level. What does that mean? It doesn't mean we're working with a nuclear engineering department. What it means is we want to leverage the full power of those institutions, because nuclear uses engineering, mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, HR, IT, all of it. So we need to engage with those academia at the institutional level so that we can leverage all that they have to offer towards the nuclear industry, and just ensure that we're tackling all of the challenges that we're going to face as we do a larger deployment of nuclear in Canada. Hope
Great.
that answers the question. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks very much. And thank you, everyone. It's almost 8:30. We're almost at the end of our time. We've gotten through the questions that we had. So thank you all for being here and sticking with us, and for some great questions and provoking some interesting discussion. Before I sign off, I'd like to just pass it back one more time to Jim and then to Fred for some concluding remarks. Just summing up sort of what you thought, what you've heard, where we're headed next, et cetera, whatever enters your mind as we conclude tonight's discussion. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I guess two things come to mind. The first one is, and Fred and I talk about this a lot, it's there's a lot happening, a lot of really good things happening, and it's a very, very good time to be in the industry, and AECL is making an important contribution. The second thing is, I'm still really impressed by Fred and his team and everything that the AECL staff have done, and the answers you had tonight, the wide range of questions that came in, the ability and the people really understand what's going on, and help guide what's being delivered by CNL. So I guess part of my conclusion is to thank everyone for the contributions in the past year, and we're looking, as the board, we're always looking for more in the years to come. And Jeremy, excellent job moderating. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, hey, you're praising the moderator. That's then we really like that. But message received. Good job, but don't rest on your laurels, because the board is always looking for more, right? Thanks, Jim. Fred, over to you.
No, and I would, well, first of all, thank you, Jim. On behalf of the AECL team, we really do value your confidence in us, and we very much appreciate the guidance and direction that we get from the board. I think it makes us all much stronger. In closing, I guess I just want to say, as somebody who's been in the Canadian nuclear industry for a long, long time, I'm very proud of Canada's nuclear heritage. I think this is something that we don't, as Canadians, we don't talk enough about what we've accomplished in this sphere. It is absolutely incredible. We talk about being a tier 1 nuclear nation, but what does that actually mean? Well, what it means is that we have strength, depth of capability in every aspect of nuclear, from mining to research and development, through academia, through the supply chain, through the building of technology, through the management of waste and its final disposal. We have it all. And how many countries around the world can actually share in that? There are not many. There are only 6 countries in the world that export nuclear reactor technology, and we're one of them. So it makes me very proud of what our history is, but what makes me even more proud is what's being accomplished right now, what's being accomplished at the lab, what's being accomplished in the nuclear industry more broadly, through the utilities, through the supply chain, through academia. And for all of you watching, I hope you will share some of that pride and know that we've accomplished a lot, and we have the potential to accomplish so much more for not only for Canada, but by exporting nuclear technology in support the entire world in both energy and health. So with that, I will also say great job, Jeremy. And I want to say thank you to Alistair. It's probably close to 2 o'clock in the morning where you are, Alistair. So thank you for hanging in there. And thank you for the amazing team at AECL and at CNL.
Thanks very much, Fred. And Alistair did pass the test, as he had several questions and he proved that he did not fall asleep. So good job by him. But in seriousness, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's been a great discussion, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to engage with you. And I will say, on the subject of engagement, our website, aecl.ca, is a place you can go to find out more information. We've got lots of information there about our missions, plans, reports, all kinds of stuff that you can dig your teeth into. In addition, if you'd like to contact us, there's information on the website of how to contact us. Speaking of which, I think my team running the questions over here has told me that there's been a couple of longer or more detailed questions, and we will get answers to those in writing. So if you've asked a question and it hasn't come up, don't worry, we will get back to you. We have a firm commitment to answer everything that we've heard today. So we will do that. And as I'd mentioned before, we're going to post this meeting on YouTube. So if you saw something here that you liked or that you thought was thought-provoking, and you wanted to share it with somebody in your network, we'd really appreciate it. And I think without any other business, that brings us to the end of our program. And once again, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us and wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you.